Okay, this is notes 9.1 part 2, and I'm going to forget about all of this auto-ionization of water, and let's just talk about what is pH. pH definition. Okay, and pH is simply a scale from 1 to 14. 1 is very acidic. 14 is very basic. Okay, now how do they come up with this scale of 1 to 14? Well, what they did was they looked at the concentration of H plus ions, and then they used a log. They used the logarithm to assign a value to it. Okay, the concentration of H plus ions are very, very small. So for example, right here you see the concentration of H plus ions in a weak acid might be 1 times 10 to the negative 6 moles per liter. That's really, really small if you think about that, how small that is. That's 0.00001 of these ions per moles of these ions per liter. Okay, so we're talking about really small numbers, but these numbers, because they have a huge effect on the properties of the acid or base, and it's just easier, instead of writing this out, to write a whole number. And so the way you do that is you take the log of this, you take the negative log of this. Okay, and I'm not going to get into all of that now because that's beyond the scope of the class. But if you're going, let me just tell you this. Here's the formula. If you're going from pH to H plus concentration, to figure out the pH of something, if it's given just the concentration of H plus, you use the following formula. pH equals the negative log times the concentration of H plus ions. Okay? Now that sounds scary, but it's really not for your test, because check it out. Look, all of your test questions are going to be given a base 10 like this. And all you have to do is this. Watch. I can do it without a calculator. Ready? The negative log of 1 times 10 to the negative 6. If you were to do this in your calculator, which I'm not going to, equals, I can do it without a calculator. You just take the exponent and turn it positive. That's it. So my pH, if my H plus concentration is 1 times 10 to the negative 6, my pH equals 6. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to do. Now, what if you're given the pH and they asked you for the concentration of H plus ions? Well, it's very simple. Concentration of H plus ions equals, it's actually the 10 to the negative pH. But instead of doing all that, here's what you have to remember. Okay, it's going to be 1 times 10 to the negative 8. All right, that's it. That's all you got to remember. You take the pH, you turn it into a negative exponent with a base 10. 1 times 10 to the negative 8. Okay, that's your concentration of H plus ions. If it's a whole number like that, it's very easy to do. What about for OH and POH? Well, POH is just the concentration of OH minus ions in solution. So POH equals the negative log of your concentration of OH minus ions. Okay, that's all. So let's do that. Here's your concentration of OH minus ions, 1 times 10 to the negative 2. So my POH, you could do this in the calculator, but you don't even need to. Look, equals negative log of 1 times 10 to the negative 2. And because it's a base 10 here, all you have to do is take the exponent and turn it positive. That's your POH. Well, if your POH is given to you, then what? If your POH is given to you, then what you do is you say POH, your concentration of OH minus equals 1 times base 10 to the negative 12. Okay, that's cool. Now what if I want to figure out the pH from this? What if they give you POH? Okay. I'm sorry, what if they give you this concentration here? There's a couple of questions like this on the test. You're given a concentration of OH minus. Your task is to figure out the pH. Well, pH equals, you take 14, because that's your pH scale, 1 to 14, minus 2. And that's going to be 12. Okay, that's how you figure out your pH. And the formula for that is over here. Okay, formula is pH plus POH equals 14. Okay, so if you figure out either one of these, if you can figure out either one of these, then you can also just subtract from 14 and figure out the other one as well. Okay, so let's do that up here. What's my POH? Well, POH, I've got pH of 6, right? So if I want to figure out my POH, I just subtract pH from 14. So let's figure out our POH. Ready? POH up here equals 14 minus 6. 14 minus 6 is 8. Okay, that's your POH. Pretty neat, huh? And pretty easy, too. Okay, so let me look at this. I'm going to pause and look at this and tell you if we need to learn this or not. This might be overkill, so let me pause and double check. I think there's some value to learning this. Let me go ahead and do this. I'll put it up here, but I don't want you to copy anything else. Here, let me just do it like that, okay? And then I'll explain it, and then you can copy as well. All right, so in an acidic solution, your concentration of H plus is greater than your concentration of OH minus. That makes sense. You have a high concentration of H plus. That's why it's acidic. Your pH is going to be less than 7. Your concentration of H plus ions is going to be greater than 1.0 times 10 to the 7 molar. So you can look at it like this visually. You have in an acidic solution now, in an acidic solution, your concentration of H plus is greater than your concentration of OH minus. They're both going to be in there, but your H plus is going to be greater. Okay, and as the solution becomes more neutral, look at what happens here. Okay, look at what happens. Eventually, if it's neutral, your concentration of H plus equals your concentration of OH minus. Your pH goes to 7, and your H plus concentration is 1 times 10 to the negative 7 molar. And these concentrations, again, are now the same, okay? As it becomes more basic, look what happens. Your H plus concentration dies off, or I shouldn't say dies off, it just gets smaller. Your pH is greater than 7, and your H plus concentration is less than your OH minus concentration. Okay, so that's it. That's acids and bases in a nutshell.